Howdy, neighbor. Thanks for coming back for the next chapter of Logan versus the Hateful Strawberries. We're on chapter 6 of this draft read, Blessed Fruit. Logan was in agony. After coming down the ladder, Pa wouldn't even look at him. All he did was pick up the pieces of the broken spyglass and in his quiet voice say, "We'll discuss the consequences of this after church tomorrow. Now go to bed." That was it. Logan had no idea what would happen after church, but his mind raced with the possibilities through a sleepless night, and neither Pa nor Ma had more than 2 words to say to him at breakfast. He was only offered bland oatmeal for breakfast, which despite missing dinner, he had little taste for. He finished it wordlessly and went to the barn to do his morning chores. As he scooped up feed corn, he looked up to see Rascal's eyes peeking over the top of the hayloft. For a brief moment, heat rose up in Logan's neck, and he felt his jaw tighten. That little rat got him in so much trouble, he should have just cut the tree down on top of that dumb critter. Rascal must have sensed Logan's mood because it just kept staring down at him with a pitiful look in its eyes that melted Logan's hard heart. It was clear the critter was hungry, but maybe not so hungry that it was up for venturing out of the comfort of the hayloft. Logan filled his pocket with feed corn and climbed up the ladder. When he got to the corner where they'd fought, he found the sack had been scratched up and chewed on, but there wasn't a hole big enough to get the strawberries out. That was one tough sack. Rascal sat back on his haunches and held out his hands expectantly. Logan pulled some corn from his pocket and tried to drop some in the raccoon's waiting hands. It pulled them back, and the corn clattered to the wooden floor. The little critter cocked its head and barked once as if to say, "Are you kidding me with this corn?" Logan's face flushed, and he was about to let the critter have it for getting him in so much trouble, but that was likely to get him into more trouble, so he pulled his pants pockets inside out, dumping the last of the corn on the floor. "Sorry, little guy, no more strawberries for you. I need them for the fair." The raccoon's hunger must have gotten the best of it because it started picking up the kernels and chewing on them. Logan hoped it was enough to keep the little guy happy. He was beginning to like the critter. Logan grabbed the bag and decided it would be better if he took it with him. So while the raccoon was nose deep in the corn, he snuck the bag behind his back and slowly backed away from the raccoon, careful to keep the bag out of sight. He hoped the pile of corn was big enough to keep Rascal occupied until he returned. When Logan reached the ground, he looked for a place to stash the strawberry sack. An old milk bucket was lying on its side in the cow pen. He thought if he turned that upside down and maybe sprinkled some hay around it, nobody would think twice about it. The strawberries seemed to call to him as he went to store his treasure. Breakfast was bland, and how could he have energy to do his chores on just oatmeal? He took out one of his precious treasures and slowly enjoyed the sticky sweet taste. Then, despite wanting to devour the rest of the strawberries, he tied the bag and put it under the bucket. He returned to the feed corn bin and found the corn had taken on a pleasant, sparkly tone as he poured it into the bucket. His mind wandered through mixed emotions as his chores progressed. When he was done, he cleaned up in their home's deafening silence, and the 3 of them loaded up in their 2-wheel buggy for the ride to the church in the center of Blooming Glen. His parents' silence and disapproving looks weighed him down like a ton of bricks. Would they ever forgive him? Logan took his seat silently in the corner of the front row bench of the men's section of the church, and Aiden came in just a few minutes later and sat down in the middle of the bench. Logan was glad to see Aiden at church, but wished he could talk to him. But as Pa took his place on the elders' bench at the front of the church, Logan decided it would be best to keep his mouth shut for now. To keep himself occupied, Logan stared at the stained glass window at the front of the church. Under the influence of the strawberries, it sparkled and seemed to take on a life of its own. The sparkles reminded him of the broken spyglass. He had to find a way to make it up to Pa. Aiden was smart and good at metalworking. Maybe he could fix the spyglass so Pa wouldn't be so mad. Aiden was pretty smart about mechanical things, but it didn't mean he was right about the strawberries. Just the same, better not to mention the strawberries until he worked things out with Pa. Logan's musings were interrupted by the parson calling the congregation to order. Church was always so hard for Logan. Between the ants in his pants and the disapproving stares of the elders at the front of the church, he often wondered why the parson said these messages were about the good news. Usually on a Sunday morning, the only good news Logan got was the message would be done early for some special occasion. But the strawberries seemed to make it easier to zone out staring at the stained glass. As the pastor droned on and on, Logan suddenly keyed into something the pastor was saying. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. Long-suffering? That's what he was doing right now, long-suffering through this talk. But wait, didn't Ma say that word meant self-control? She was always trying to get him to have some self-control. The more he chewed on this idea in his mind, the more he realized this was the first sermon he'd been to where he just quietly sat there without wiggling around or finding something to fiddle with and chew on. Could the strawberries be the fruit of the Spirit? The strawberries made everything so bright and amazing. So how could Aiden say they were from the darkness? Maybe Aiden knew they were good and wanted them all for himself. No, that couldn't be quite right. Aiden wanted to destroy them, so it wasn't like Aiden was trying to hide them or anything. Why would he think that of Aiden? Aiden was his best friend. The piano kicked up with a familiar tune, and everyone stood up to sing, pulling Logan from his deep thoughts. He found himself singing, "Praise God from whom all blessings flow." Maybe those strawberries were a blessing from God, after all. That was chapter 6. Come on back for chapter 7.